Where is that useless man?
I didn't marry a man who eats noodles from a pot, Jae-won. I married Choi Jae-won, the CEO of Choi Industries. That man is gone.
What are you saying?
She said it on a Tuesday, not a dramatic Friday night. Not during a thunderstorm with lightning cracking the sky the way it does in the movies. It was a plain, ordinary Tuesday morning in Seoul. The kind where the Han River sits grey and still, where office workers shuffle to the subway with coffee cups and tired eyes, where the city breathes without ceremony. Choi Jae-won was sitting at his own dining table, in his own home, or what used to be his own home, wearing a shirt he hadn't ironed because the housekeeper had been let go 3 weeks ago. He was eating instant ramyun from the pot because there were no more personal chefs, no more Sunday brunches with imported cheeses and champagne from Rhin. His wife, Park Soo-yeon, walked down the staircase. 42 years old, perfect posture, wearing a silk blouse the colour of ivory. Her hair was done. Her makeup was done. Her luggage, 6 pieces of it, matching, Italian, was already waiting at the bottom of the stairs, placed there by the driver she still kept on her own salary. Jae-won looked up from his ramyeon. He said nothing. He already knew, but he did not know what she was about to say. Soo-yeon pulled on her coat, checked her phone once, then looked at him. Really looked at him. The way you look at something you are deciding whether to throw away or donate. She chose her words slowly, deliberately, the way a surgeon selects a blade. I didn't marry a man who eats noodles from a pot, Jae-won. I married Choi Jae-won, the CEO of Choi Industries.
That man is gone.
That man is gone. What's sitting at my table right now? She paused and let the silence stretch until it had teeth. Is a mistake I wasted 12 years correcting. She picked up her Hermes bag. You were always just one bad investment away from being nobody. Turns out, I was right. And she walked out. The door didn't slam. That would have suggested passion, emotion, that she still felt something. Instead, it clicked shut with the soft, indifferent sound of a chapter ending. Choi Jae-won sat at his table with his pot of ramyun going cold. He was 40 years old. He had once commanded boardrooms, had once shaken hands with presidents, had built Choi Industries from a small logistics firm. His late father left him into a multi-billion one conglomerate that stretched across real estate, shipping, and technology. He had been on the cover of Forbes' career at 34. He had been the man other men measured themselves against. And now he sat in a house that the bank would repossess in 60 days, eating noodles from a pot, listening to the sound of his wife's car pulling out of a gate he could no longer afford to maintain. He did not cry. He wanted to, but the tears would not come. Because somewhere beneath the wreckage, beneath the shame and the silence, something else was rising. A memory, small, warm, and 8 years old. The collapse of Choi Industries did not happen overnight. It happened the way great things fall, first slowly, then all at once. But before all of that, before the bad investment in the Incheon development project, before the partner who embezzled, before the global shipping slowdown that strangled their margins, before all of it, there was Lagos, 2016. Jae-won was 32 years old, freshly married, riding the crest of his success like a man who believed the wave would never break. He had flown to Lagos for a joint venture, a logistics corridor between Apapa Port and 3 inland distribution hubs. The deal was worth 40 billion won. He had come alone, preferring to survey markets with his own eyes before sending teams. He stepped out of his hotel in Victoria Island on a Thursday evening, jet-lagged and restless, and did something his assistant specifically told him not to do. He walked. Not the sanitized stretch between the hotel and the corporate park. He walked into the city, the real city, the one that breathed and sweated and argued with itself in 6 languages simultaneously. He walked past the yellow buses that bellowed diesel smoke, past the bread sellers and the phone card hawkers, past the women who balanced impossible things on their heads with the grace of ballerinas. He found her at the corner of a street he could not pronounce. She was 20 years old. Her name, he would not learn it until later, was Adaeze Okonkwo. She was selling suya and jollof rice from a small cart, her face shining under a kerosene lamp, her hands moving with the practiced speed of someone who had been doing this since she was old enough to hold tongs. She was also, he noticed, crying, not dramatically. She wasn't wailing, just tears moving silently down her face while she tended her fire, while she fanned her coals, while she scooped rice into paper plates for customers who never once looked up at her face. Jae-won stood at a distance and watched for a moment. Then he walked up and ordered a plate. She wiped her face quickly with the back of her wrist and served him without a word. Her English was precise, careful, the kind that comes from someone who learned it from books and then taught themselves to soften it with life. He paid. He stepped aside. He ate. The food was extraordinary. It was the kind of food that makes you stop mid-bite and reassess everything you have ever eaten. The suya had a heat that built slowly and honestly. The jollof rice was smoky and deep, cooked over real fire the way it had not been cooked in the hotel restaurants where he'd been eating. He came back to the cart. "This is the best thing I've eaten in 3 days," he said. She looked at him. Really looked. With the kind of eyes that have already seen enough of the world to know when a compliment is real and when it is performance. "Thank you," she said simply. "Why are you crying?" She was quiet. Then, "The man who owns the space where I park my cart is raising the fee. I cannot pay it. He will take my cart tomorrow if I don't bring the money by morning." "How much?" she told him. 40,000 naira. Which was, at the exchange rate that evening, roughly $30. $30. Choi Jae-won reached into his wallet. He gave her the equivalent of $50 in naira, all he had on him in cash, and held up a hand when she began to protest. "It's not charity," he said. "Consider it a business investment. You cook like a professional. That cart deserves a restaurant." She stared at him. "You don't even know my name," she said. "Tell me." "Adaeze." "Jae-won," he said. He put his hand out. She shook it. Her grip was firm. He walked back to his hotel. He almost didn't look back. But he did, just once. And she was watching him go with an expression he couldn't name. Not gratitude exactly. Something older than gratitude. Something closer to recognition, as though she had filed him away in a place she reserved for things worth remembering. He forgot about her the way busy men forget small kindnesses immediately and completely. The Lagos deal closed. He flew back to Seoul. His life continued its upward trajectory. He never thought about the girl at the corner again. The bank took the house on a Wednesday. 63 days after Soo-yeon walked out, Choi Jae-won stood in the parking lot of a convenience store in Mapogu with 140,000 won in his wallet, a single suitcase, and nowhere to go. His business partners had scattered like smoke. His investors had gone silent. His lawyers had done what lawyers do when the retainer runs out, stopped answering. His friends, the men and women who had filled his birthday dinners and his company galas and his golf weekends, had developed a curious, collective amnesia. They didn't know him anymore. Or rather, they knew him but had quietly decided that association with failure was its own kind of infection. Only one person called, Kim Dong-hyun, his college roommate. A man who had never been wealthy, who drove a 12-year-old sedan and taught middle school mathematics and had never once appeared at any of Jae-won's parties because he felt out of place. Dong-hyun called and said, "Come and sleep on my couch, there's no argument about it." So Jae-won slept on his old friend's couch in a small apartment in Mapogu, listening to the sounds of a city that had no idea he existed anymore. And he thought about who he was when the titles and the money and the marble floors were removed. He found very little. And that, he realized, was the actual catastrophe. Not the money, not the house, not the wife who had used his lowest moment to say the most precise, devastating thing a person could say to another person. The catastrophe was that Park Soo-yeon had not been entirely wrong. He had defined himself entirely by the empire. He had been exactly one bad investment from nobody, because he had invested everything into the corporation and almost nothing into the man. This realization did not come gently. It arrived at 3 in the morning on a Wednesday, and it sat on his chest like a stone, and he lay on Dong-hyun's couch staring at the ceiling until dawn turned the window grey. Then he got up. He brushed his teeth. He made Dong-hyun coffee. He opened his laptop and began to do the only thing left that made any sense. He began again, not with grand gestures, not with a dramatic comeback plan. He began the way seeds begin, quietly, underground, with no audience and no applause. He reached out to a small logistics consulting firm and offered his expertise for a fee so modest it would have made his former self wince. They said yes. He worked 16 hours a day. He did not complain. He did not look at his old Forbes cover, which Dong-hyun had, inexplicably and with great loyalty, framed on his bathroom wall. He worked. Months passed. The money was small, but it was honest. He moved out of Dong-hyun's apartment and into a one-room in Hongdae that smelled like someone else's cooking and had a view of a parking garage. He did not hate it. For the first time in years, he slept deeply. It was the kind of thing that could only happen in the age of the internet, or perhaps in the age of fate. The line between those two things being thinner than most people admit. 14 months after his collapse, Jae-won saw a news article. He was eating breakfast. Real breakfast now, eggs he had scrambled himself on a stove the size of a textbook, when it appeared in his feed, shared by a Korean business group he'd forgotten he'd joined. The headline read, "Nigerian food entrepreneur Adaeze Okonkwo expands Adaeze's table to 3 African cities, how she built a restaurant empire from a street cart." He stopped chewing. He clicked. The article was from a Lagos business publication, and it was accompanied by a photograph. A woman standing in front of a beautifully designed restaurant, arms crossed, smiling with the particular confidence of someone who has earned everything they have and knows it. She was wearing a yellow dress and her hair was natural and full, and her eyes. He recognized the eyes. The same eyes that had looked at him on a street corner in Lagos 8 years ago. The same eyes that had decided he was worth filing away. He read the entire article. Adaeze Okonkwo, 28, founder of Adaeze's Table, which had begun as a single street food cart in Lagos Island and had, through a combination of her extraordinary cooking, a viral video that accumulated 9 million views, and a small business loan she'd secured from a microfinance institution, grown into a restaurant group with locations in Lagos, Accra, and Nairobi. She was quoted as saying that her cooking philosophy was simple. Food should make people feel that someone, somewhere, gave enough of a damn to cook it properly. At the bottom of the article, almost as a footnote, was a detail that made him sit very still. The journalist had asked her about her earliest memory of believing she could build something, and she had said, "There was a night I was about to lose my cart. A Korean man I had never met stopped and ate my food and told me it deserved a restaurant. He gave me money he didn't have to give. I don't know his name, not his full name. But I cooked my next meal for him. And the one after that. I have been cooking for him ever since." Choi Jae-won read that sentence 4 times. Then he closed his laptop, sat very still for a long moment, and did something he had not done since the night his father died. He wept. Not from sadness, from the specific, overwhelming feeling of realizing that a small thing you did, a $30 thing, a thing you forgot the moment you walked away from it, had become someone's foundation. He composed himself. Then he opened his laptop again, and he found her. It took him 40 minutes to write 6 sentences. He rewrote it 11 times. He deleted grandiose versions and self-pitying versions and overly formal versions. He ended up with this. Dear Ms. Okonkwo, my name is Choi Jae-won. I think I may be the Korean man from the street corner in Lagos in 2016. I read your interview and I wanted to reach out, not to take credit for anything that is entirely yours, only to say that you are the one who told me the food was extraordinary. You just hadn't heard yourself say it yet. I hope your restaurants are everything the food deserved. Sincerely, Jae-won. He sent it before he could second-guess it. He expected nothing, or rather, he told himself to expect nothing, which is not the same thing, she replied in 4 hours. I have been looking for you for 8 years. Adasi. He had no real reason to go to Lagos. He told himself it was business. There were logistics opportunities in West Africa, his consulting work was expanding, it made professional sense. He told himself this in the way people construct respectable scaffolding around the things they truly want. He went because she had said, I have been looking for you for 8 years, and he needed to understand what that meant from a woman who could have said anything. He arrived on a Tuesday afternoon, and the Lagos air hit him the way it always does. Like a city exhaling 100 years of stories at once, warm and loud and electric with urgency. She had sent a car. The driver held a sign that read, J-Boy, an auto-corrected mutilation of Jae-won that made him laugh genuinely from his stomach for what felt like the first time in years. Adazi's table in Lagos was not what he expected. He had imagined something sleek and corporate, a restaurant that had forgotten where it came from. Instead, it was warm. The walls were terracotta and deep green. There were photographs of markets and street corners. The tables were wood, scarred and honest. The kitchen was open, and you could see the fire. And behind that fire, directing 3 cooks with the quiet authority of someone who has never needed to raise her voice to be heard, was Adaze. She looked up when he walked in. She was 28 years old, and she was the most certain person he had ever seen. Not arrogant, certain. There is a difference. Arrogance is noise. Certainty is stillness. She wiped her hands on a cloth, walked out from behind the counter, and stopped 3 feet in front of him. She looked at him the same way she had looked at him on the street corner, filing him away, deciding. You look like someone who has had a difficult year, she said. 14 months, he said. Come, she said. Eat first, talk after. She fed him. Not a tasting menu. Not a curated experience. She sat him at a corner table and brought him a bowl of ofe onugbu with pounded yam and egusi soup and grilled tilapia with a pepper sauce that rewired something in his brain. She brought him zobo to drink. She sat across from him and watched him eat with the satisfaction of someone who knows exactly how good their food is. You're not eating, he said. I'm watching, she said. I cooked this for you. I want to see if I got it right. He didn't know what to say to that. So he ate. And then they talked for 3 hours as the dinner service began around them and the restaurant filled with noise and laughter and the clatter of plates. They talked the way people talk when they have been waiting to have the conversation and didn't know it until it started. He told her everything. The rise, the fall, the partners who disappeared, the investors who went cold. The wife who had stood in the kitchen and dismantled him with a sentence. He told her what Soo-yeon had said. A mistake I wasted 12 years correcting. Adaze listened without interrupting. When he finished, she was quiet for a moment. Then she said, She told you who she was the moment she said that. The cruelty of it. That was always inside her. The money just kept it dressed nicely. He stared at her. You're not sorry for me, he said. It wasn't an accusation. It was wonder. I'm sorry you were in pain, she said carefully. I'm not sorry the pretenders left. Sorry people leaving is not loss. It's disclosure. He thought about that for a long time. He stayed in Lagos for 2 weeks. He told himself it was still about business. The scaffolding was getting more elaborate. Every day he went to the restaurant. He helped, or tried to. He was, it turned out, a disaster in the kitchen. He burned things. He underseasoned things. He stood too close to the fire and then too far from it. The cooks found him hilarious. Adas found him useful in other ways. She had been struggling with the supply chain for her Nairobi location, and his logistics expertise cut through the problem in 3 days. In return, she taught him to make jollof rice. Not the hotel version, the real version. Over open fire with the right tomatoes, with the timing that cannot be rushed. You have to trust the fire, she told him, standing beside him at the outdoor cooking station behind the restaurant, the evening sky going amber and purple above Lagos. If you keep lifting the lid to check, it won't cook properly. Some things need to be left alone to become what they're supposed to be. He understood she was not only talking about rice. On his last evening in Lagos, they sat on the rooftop of the restaurant after closing. The city hummed below them. The air smelled like ocean and wood smoke and the distant sweetness of ripe plantain. "Why did you keep looking for me?" he asked. "You built all of this without me. You didn't need me." Adaze turned her glass in her hands. "You were the first person who ever told me the food deserved more," she said. "Not my family, they thought the cart was shameful. Not my friends. They thought I was being stubborn. A stranger who ate one plate of food at a kerosene lamp on a street corner told me it deserved a restaurant." She paused. "Do you know what that does to a person? When the first person to believe in you is a stranger who has nothing to gain from believing." He was quiet. "I wasn't looking for you to thank you," she continued. "I was looking for you because I wanted you to know that you were right, that the thing you said, which you probably forgot the moment you said it, it became the sentence I repeated to myself every time I wanted to quit. Every early morning, every bad month, every landlord, every failed dish, every investor who looked at a young black woman from Lagos and saw a risk rather than a future." She looked at him directly. "You said the food deserved more. I needed you to know it got more." Choi Jae-won had negotiated billion-won deals. He had stood in front of boardrooms of 50 people and spoken without a tremor in his voice. He had absolutely nothing to say. So he said the truth. "I'm glad I walked in the wrong direction that night." Adaze smiled, and it was the kind of smile that rearranges things. "So am I," she said. He went back to Seoul. He did not know what to call what was growing between them. It was too careful and too large for easy naming, and he had learned from the wreckage of his previous life the cost of forcing shapes onto things that need to find their own. But he knew this. He was not the same man who had arrived in Lagos. Something had reorganized itself. Some order of priority had shifted, quietly, the way tectonic plates shift, with no visible drama and enormous consequence. He worked. His consulting firm was growing. A small tech startup in Busan had brought him on as a strategic advisor. He was not rich, not even close to the wealth he had lost, but he was building something with his own hands, at his own pace, with complete clarity about what it was and what it was for. He and Adaze spoke every day. Voice calls that started as 30 minutes and ran into 2 hours. They talked about everything: food, business, families, Lagos and Seoul, the specific loneliness of having worked too hard for too long, the strange peace that comes after you lose everything and discover you are still standing. She made him laugh. He made her think. She challenged him without apology. He listened to her without agenda. 3 months after Lagos, she came to Seoul. He took her to Gwangjang Market, the oldest market in Seoul, all noise and steam and the sizzling of bindateok on flat irons. She ate everything. She interrogated the vendors about technique. She stood in front of a haenyeo fish stall and asked questions in English so precise and earnest that the grandmother running the stall answered every single one. "I want to add a Korean dish to the menu," she told him as they walked along the Cheongyecheon stream that evening. "Something that honors where you're from. My cooking," he warned, "is a danger to others." "I'm not asking you to cook it," she said. "I'm asking you to help me understand the soul of it, what it feels like, what it means." And that, he realized, was the difference. Soo-yeon had wanted the version of him that looked good in a room. Adaez wanted to understand what rooms had made him. He took her to his mother's house in Suwon. His mother, a small, sharp woman of 68 who had survived both poverty and plenty and trusted neither, made them doenjang jjigae and watched Adaez with the measuring eyes of a woman who does not give approval easily. After dinner, his mother found him in the kitchen. She said in Korean, "That woman has substance. The last one had only surface." Coming from his mother, this was practically a standing ovation. The divorce from Soo-yeon was finalized on a cold morning in January. Jae-won sat in a lawyer's office and signed the papers and felt almost nothing. Not relief, exactly. More like the feeling of finally removing a stone from inside your shoe. The discomfort had been so constant that its absence felt like a strange, new sensation. Soo-yeon did not attend. She sent her lawyer. He heard through mutual acquaintances, the few who still spoke to both of them, that she had quickly become visible in Seoul's social circuit with a man from a banking family. That she seemed very well. That she had not mentioned Jae-won's name once. He found to his genuine surprise that he did not mind. He called Adaez that evening. "It's done," he said. A pause. Then, "How do you feel?" Like I finally stopped wearing someone else's definition of myself. He heard her exhale, not quite a laugh, something softer. "Good," she said. "Now you can start wearing your own." It was not planned. He flew to Lagos again 6 months later. This time there was no scaffolding, no business pretense. He went because he was in love with her and had been for a while and had decided that honesty, however terrifying, was the only architecture worth building. He arrived at the restaurant on a Sunday morning before opening. She was at the back, prepping, slicing tomatoes with the focus of someone who takes the ordinary seriously. The kitchen smelled like crayfish and ginger. She looked up. "You didn't tell me you were coming," she said. "I was afraid I'd talk myself out of it." She put down the knife slowly. "Talk yourself out of what?" He was 40 years old. He had been on the cover of Forbes. He had stood in rooms full of men with power and said difficult things without flinching. His hands were shaking. 8 years ago, he said, I walked down the wrong street and ate the best food I'd ever tasted and walked away and forgot about it completely. He paused. I have spent the last year making sure I never forget anything that matters again. Adaez was very still. I have nothing to offer you that looks impressive, he continued. I have a consulting firm that is growing slowly. I have a one-room apartment in Hongdae that smells like someone else's cooking. I have a very loyal friend named Dong-hyun who will absolutely embarrass me at any future event you invite him to. She made a sound that was almost a laugh. I have a mother who already approves of you, which is extraordinary because she approves of almost no one. And I have... He stopped, steadied himself. I have the absolute certainty that you are the most complete person I have ever met, and that whatever I build from here, I want to build it in the direction of you. He reached into his pocket. It was not an extravagant ring. He could not afford extravagant. It was a simple gold band with a single dark stone, obsidian, that the jeweler had told him symbolized protection and transformation. He had chosen it because it felt true. Adaeze Okonkwo, he said, will you let me spend the rest of my life being worth the sentence you've been repeating to yourself all these years? The kitchen was quiet. Lagos humbled itself outside the window. She looked at him, filing him away one final time in the deepest and most permanent place. Then she said, you were already worth it. You just needed to find out for yourself. And she said yes. They were married on a Saturday in November, in Lagos. Not a grand affair. Not the kind of wedding that ends up in society magazines. 60 people, her family, his mother, and Dong-hyun. A handful of people who had earned the right to witness rather than merely attend. The food naturally was extraordinary. A menu that moved between Korea and Nigeria without apology, doenjang, alongside egusi, tteokbokki next to jollof, a dessert that Adaez had designed herself, bingsu sweetened with tiger nut milk, topped with dried hibiscus petals. Jae-won stood at the altar and watched her walk toward him in a dress the colour of the sun at 4 in the afternoon, that specific gold that belongs to neither day nor evening. And he thought about the peculiar precise mercy of failure. Because without the collapse, he would not have been looking. Without the divorce papers and the repossessed house and the ramyeon going cold in the pot, he would have remained behind the marble and the title and the performance of a life, and he would have missed this. He would have missed her. At the reception, his mother found Adaez and took both her hands in that small, decisive way of hers. In Korean, which Adaez was learning, slowly, stubbornly, in the same way she learned everything, his mother said, "You fed my son back to himself. There is no greater cooking than that." Adaez, who understood more than she let on, smiled. "He brought the fire," she said. "I just trusted it." And somewhere in Lagos, at the corner of a street Choi Jae-won could still not pronounce, a new street food vendor had set up a cart. She was 21 years old, and she was crying silently over her fire, and she did not know yet that she was building something. She did not know yet that the food was worth more. She was waiting, without knowing she was waiting, for the wrong person to walk down the right street. The city breathed around her, patient and enormous, and the fire kept burning. The people who leave when you have nothing show you who they were. The people who arrive when you have nothing show you who you are.